Well, Mr. Prime Minister, I am absolutely honored to get to speak with you. Here in America, we love you. We have prayed for you for many, many years. I almost felt like reading your book that I was reading from the scriptures. And here's the reason, because when you read the scriptures, you read miracles that God did for his people. And I read miracle after miracle after miracle that God did through you. And obviously, I know after reading your book, you would deflect that praise to many other people as well, but that God did for his people. And I have to tell you, from the very first words, I was mesmerized. I was into it. I stayed up way too late the very first night reading your book. One comment I love that you put it in 5 to 10 page chapters, because I felt like if I didn't have much time, even in between a meeting, I could pick it up and read a chapter, and I could read the start of a story, and then I could read the end of the story, and it just felt great. But I just wanted to say most of us know you as the longest serving prime minister for Israel. But what I didn't realize was your academic background and your military background. So, can you comment on that just a little bit?
Well, I was born in Israel, and I spent a few years in my childhood and teens actually in the United States. But I volunteered after high school to join the elite unit, special forces unit of the Israeli army, and I served there. And I was wounded in battle, saving hostages from a hijacked airplane. I nearly drowned in a firefight in the Suez Canal. I was bitten by a scorpion. I nearly ran with my Jeep into a phantom jet that was taking off. So I escaped death quite a few times,
Yeah.
and of course served in a time of great action against terrorism in the 1960s and early 70s. The peculiar thing was that my older brother, who had been wounded in the Six-Day War and whom I had hoped would be incapacitated from battle forever, insisted on joining my unit, which he did. And so the two of us, my older brother, Jonathan, Yoni, and me, were both officers in the same unit at the same time. And then we were joined by our younger brother. So we were three brothers in something like, if you think of Navy SEALs and Delta Force crunched together and add a little British SAS. It's a tiny unit of 100 fighters, no more, with three brothers. And, our commanders had to work extra time, overtime to separate us so we wouldn't be in the same mission. But that didn't always work out. And I described in the book in one particular mission where I went to rescue with my fellow soldiers this hijacked Sabina airplane. And my older brother, he only said, "Well, I'm coming too." And I said, "You're not." He said, "I'm the most experienced, battle experienced soldier in the unit." He was right. I said, "That's irrelevant. You can't have two brothers in out of a 16-man squad about to storm a hijacked aircraft." And I said to him, Yoni, you can't do this. He said, "I'll take your place." I said, "You can't take my place. These are my soldiers." He said, "Well, then we'll both go." And I said, "Can you think of mother and father? I mean, what would happen if something happened to one of us, to both of us?" And then he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Bibi, my life is my own and my death is my own." And he was willing to sacrifice himself for the state of Israel. Well, it turned out he didn't go, thank God. I did. I got wounded in the course of this rescue. I lay on the tarmac. Um, we'd finished the two terrorists, killed the two terrorists, neutralized the other two women terrorists. Plane didn't blow up, but I'm lying there on the tarmac with a morphine shot that a medic gave me to ease the pain. I'd been shot in the arm, and I see my brother Yoni running towards me, and he stands above me. He looks down. He has a terrible look of distress on his face, and then he stands above me. He sees a splatter of red blood on my white overall, uniform that we wore as fake mechanics. And this broad grin spreads on his face. And he said, "See, Bibi, I told you not to go." So,
Yeah, I love that story. And the reason we're getting to talk is because you sent me an advanced copy of your book, BB, My Story, and I just absolutely loved it. And I want to recommend it to everyone who's going to be watching this. But what I think people just got a taste of was the book. I mean, that's the way you tell the book. You tell the book as if I'm sitting there with you, and you give accurate details, and some of it's like an action movie, and then some of it, but you know it's real. So when I watch action movies, I don't cry because I know they're not real, but my wife does. But if it's based on a true story, then it gets me to tears, and that's what happened with your book. And your brother Yanni, he really has become a national hero. I know of the book that Yanni's letters, but it's literally God is still using your brother to this day, and isn't that right?
well, the word Jonathan means God given. And he was a great gift to my family and to the people of Israel, but I think also to the world. So 4 years after this Sabina rescue,
Yeah,
the Palestinian terrorists thought that if they don't land a plane in Israel and try to extort uh, the release of terrorist prisoners, they could do it in the heart of Africa, in Entebbe, Uganda. So they hijacked an Israeli-bound plane with 103 Jewish passengers that they kept there, and they said, "We're going to start executing the passengers if you don't give in to us." And my brother led the storming party that flew from Israel through Africa, landed in the dead of night at the terminal, approached the place. They took a Mercedes limousine that looked like Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator at the time, like his retinue, came forward, uh, neutralized the guards with silencers, and then stormed the hall where the hostages were kept. And they saved all of them except three that died in the crossfire.
yeah,
But there was only one military casualty, and that was my brother,
yeah,
who died in the rescue. So I think, Entebbe has been called the greatest rescue of modern times.
yeah,
And it became a legend, and so did Yoni. He emerged from anonymity. He became a
yeah,
hero of Israel, and I think a hero of free people everywhere.
yeah,
That was the
yeah,
background which led me. When he died, I thought I died because I had always had great hopes for him that he would somehow help protect the state of Israel, the future of our people. And now he was dead. And I had to overcome inconsolable grief and to uh, actually entered public life with a view of mobilizing the free world against international terrorism. And ultimately, this led me to become Israel's longest serving prime minister with one goal: to protect the Jewish people and Jewish state, because I think it is the embodiment
yeah.
of the biblical prophecy.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, and we believe, even though we're a Gentile Christian church, we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I know you know that, and we love the Jewish people. We love the nation of Israel. We've been involved in humanitarian aid and things like that for over 20 years. Um, Let me go back to your family just for a moment. You're reading about, and that story you just told is in the book. That's why it's such an it's I literally I have to confess, I read about half of a book, and then I feel like I've gotten it, and I just can't finish it. But yours, I read all of it, and so it's phenomenal. Um, Again, because it is the short chapters, and it's so interesting, and you told that battle from firsthand reports of men who were in that battle with your brother. And again, that when I say battle, but that recapture of a plane, that was is I think still stands to this day as one of the greatest military exploits ever. But I was amazed reading about your parents and the influence they had on your life, the brilliance of your father, And your mother, I love that your mother said you need to get a degree in business, not just architecture, so that when you become an architect, you can run your business. But all that stuff, your father and your mother had a tremendous impact on your life, didn't they?
They did indeed. My father was a brilliant historian, and he, at the age of 23, on the year that Hitler rose to power, he warned of a Holocaust, impending Holocaust, of the destruction of the Jewish people. And he also said that the only way that we can win this is to tell the rest of humanity that their life is on the line too. That what begins with this extermination of Jews would threaten all of civilization. He was right. He was 23 years old, 1933. So he was a brilliant prognosticator of historical events, and he taught me a great deal. My mother said, was a brilliant woman in her own right. She said, I married a genius, but even a genius has to have someone who darns his socks, which is just as well, because my father was the a special combination of a genius, like a genius and an absent-minded professor. So sometimes he would dial himself, his own number. We had one of the few phones in the neighborhood, and then my mother would have to help him out. And he would. She said her name was Sela, but she said her real name was Sela Ware because he constantly asked her, Sela, where are my glasses? Sela, where's my book? And they were just a wonderful couple, and but she was no pushover. I mean, she was a very strong, independent woman, and she had the job of allowing him to pursue his historical studies with three vibrant little boys at home, and she managed it very well. But the biggest obstructionist was me because I was a middle child, and I was known as the stubborn one, and I was very stubborn. For example, I said to my older brother Yoni, there was no ice cream that you could buy from supermarkets at the time. Okay, so my mother made homemade ice cream, pretty good though, in these dishes. And I complained to my older brother Yoni because he was the one who was cutting it in three for the three of us, him, me, and my younger brother Ido. I said, "Hey, I'm not getting my fair share." So now he's 12 years old, and like a 12-year-old Solomon, he says, "Okay, here's the solution. You cut it, but we choose first." So I was obviously I was obviously wedged in there, and because I created discipline problems, my mother said to my father one day when I got too raucous, she said, "Benzion, son of Zion, Benzion, uh, why don't you discipline?" Okay, and my father gets up to discipline me. I'm 5 years old now. Okay, and I run to the other side of the room, turn around, arms, akimbo, and I turn around and I say to my father, uh, just because you're bigger than me doesn't give you the right to hit me. And my father stopped dead in his tracks and he said, Sela, he's right. And that basically extricated himself from a job he wasn't going to do anyway.
Yeah.
So I had a wonderful childhood with wonderful parents, wonderful brothers, and uh, and I'm very grateful to have had them as my nuclear family. But then also was very lucky to have my wife and my boys who supported me through the tempests and whirlwinds of politics, which in Israel is not a gentleman's sport, and it's not for the faint-hearted.
Well, you all those stories I remember from your book, and some of those I even read to my wife Debbie because, again, I just want to say that, and I just want people to know I'm not I I wanted to interview you today, not just to get to talk to you, but I want people to get the book because it is your autobiography, and it's BB because I assume that's the nickname that they called you, and even some of the battles that they would say that. My story, it's your story. You wrote it. It has all those personal stories in it. As I read stories to my wife Debbie, she already said, "I get it next," uh, so it literally is fascinating. I really can't commend you enough on how vulnerable and how transparent and how humorous and how human you are in this book. To those of us who knew you only as a world figure, yet we got to see so many glimpses into your personal life. I do want to though talk to you a little bit about being prime minister, the longest serving prime minister in Israel. But what led you to go then into politics instead of business? What led you to try to stand up for the Jewish state? I mean, what kind of led you in that direction?
Well, without a doubt, Yoni's fall in Entebbe changed the course of my life and led it to public service because I thought that while Yoni died in the military battle against terrorism, he never thought of it as merely a military battle. He thought it was a civilizational battle of the civilization against the barbarians, and we needed to change the way that free societies looked at terrorism. They most of the time they were apologetic towards or they were cowed by it. And I thought there had to be a different approach in which we challenged the states who supported the terrorists, who operated them. And that led me eventually into Israeli politics. What led me there was that I thought that Israel, to survive and thrive, had to be strong. To be strong, it needed a very strong army with a very strong intelligence arm. The problem with that is it costs a lot of money. To get the money you needed to
Yeah,
revamp Israel's economy from a semi-socialist one to a free market economy. So I had to at once revamp Israel's economy in order to fund its military. But by the time we did that, and Israel became so powerful as an innovative nation, as a startup nation, that we could also combine these two forces to a third force, which is diplomatic power. So we had economic power, military power, diplomatic power. That's what I call the Iron Triangle of peace, because what happened was that Arab states around us, when they saw that Israel was here to stay, it was so strong, there was no point in fighting it. There was every point of joining it in a common effort against Iran, in a common effort to better the lives of their citizens with Israeli technology. That's really what I spent my adult life doing, empowering Israel with military, economic, and diplomatic strength and creating peace through strength. And that came about, obviously, the best time it came about was with President Trump and his team when we did the Abraham Accords,
yes,
which showed what happens when an American president and an Israeli prime minister work in tandem for peace through strength. You actually get both. You get peace and you get strength.
yeah, yeah. So I want to ask you about. I know you worked with three U.S. presidents and many world leaders, even Putin. But I want to go back to the accords with President Trump. I have like the Abraham Accords. I have like a layman's understanding of that. And so one of the things I loved about your book was you used to tell people, tell me in one sentence what you're trying to say. And I say that to young preachers and teachers in Israel. You would call them rabbis. As I'm mentoring them, I have to stop them and say, would you just tell me in one sentence what this lesson is about you're trying to teach the congregation? And so you don't have to do it in one sentence, obviously, but can you explain to us what the Abraham Accords are?
Yes. The Abraham Accords are four peace treaties that Israel had with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. These are four Arab states who didn't have formal peace agreements with Israel. We couldn't get them because the Palestinians vetoed for a quarter of a century any peace with any one of these states or anyone else. And I said, and everybody said, you first have to have peace with the Palestinians. I said, well, you can't because they don't want a peace with Israel. They want a peace without Israel. They don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel. So if we wait for the Palestinians, we'll never get this broader Arab-Israeli peace with the Arab states. And so in a sentence, what I did was I went around it. I didn't go to the 1% of the Arab world who are the Palestinians. I went to the 99%. I didn't let the tail wag the dog the way other people did. And once we did that, once we approached directly the Arab states, uh, they came along, and that gives a lot of hope for
Yeah.
a broader peace. And so that's it. That's what it was. The Abraham Accords was going around the Palestinian veto directly to an Israeli Arab peace with key states in the Arab world. And I think more will follow. If I get in, I'm going to be sure that more will follow.
I agree. I agree. And I definitely hope you do because God has used you. God's hand has been on your life since you were a young boy. And but when you talk about the working with President Trump, you worked with three U.S. presidents, and again, as I said, other world leaders, even Putin. Is there any story that maybe comes to your mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot here that you can share. You might say a lot of stories come to my mind, but I better not share them. But any story about working with world leaders?
Well, look, I usually try to find common ground, and I usually find it. But if you don't, and sometimes you have a clash, then you have no choice but to take a stand. And uh, in fact, my speech in the U.S. Congress was unprecedented because you don't have world leaders who are invited to a joint session of Congress and they have to stand up against an American president. In this case, it was President Obama, whom I respected but fundamentally disagreed with on this deal with Iran. So I took a while. I had to think about that. Am I really going to do this? And I said, well, I have no choice because the survival of my country is at hand, and Iran with nuclear weapons was threatening to annihilate us. So I went there, and I'm ready to go. All right, I'm fine. I've resolved. I'm prepared my speech. I come to Washington to the Willard Hotel, and I'm going to brush up on my. This is the most important speech of my life, and I've given a few, right? uh, and I'm prepared to refine it and practice it because you have to practice. And then something awful happens. I have a sinus condition and it flares up and I can't breathe. I try to read the speech and I'm stopped in mid sentence, every mid sentence.
Mm.
Now you think maybe that's a panic attack. All right. Well, here's you try this. You just hold your hold your nostrils, okay? Stay on like that for several hours and see if you can read anything. So I'm saying, what did I do? I overdosed on these nose drops. And my wife tries to bring me a hot bowl of water. The medic that accompanies the prime minister, he tries to bring me, another antihistamine. Just makes things worse. And Sarah, my wife, says to me, "Yeah, go to sleep. It'll pass by morning," but it doesn't pass. I don't get even a second sleep. The night I get up in the morning, I shave, I dress, and I'm completely clogged. And now I say, all right, there's nothing to do, just grin and bear it. I don't know, pass through it. And we're driving towards Capitol. And on the way, miracle of miracles, my sinus is cleared.
Mm.
And so when I went into Speaker Boehner's office, I was all smiles. And they stayed clear for the evening and right through the
That's funny.
evening. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's I don't know, maybe that's Providence helping out,
yeah,
but it went well.
yeah.
And there are a lot of vignettes like that. I told the story in big details and small details of what actually happens behind the scenes in the highest echelons of diplomacy. And a lot of time there's conflict. A lot of times you have to take a stance. A lot of time you're attacked, and sometimes you're attacked viciously, and your family is attacked, and you have to find uh, the well springs of faith uh, and belief that carry you through these turbulent times, and so does my family. And I have to say that without that, you have nothing uh, because unless you have a direction and a purpose, you can't live a life of purpose. I have lived a life of purpose. I'm still engaged in it, the battle to ensure Israel's future. But I think that all of your viewers who seek a life of purpose could find insights in this book, and I really mean that. I think it's not
I
only
believe that.
those who love Israel and understand the the embodiment of biblical prophecies, the ingathering of the exiles, the return to the Holy Land, but also the life of purpose. How do you, as an individual, uh, find purpose in your life and redirect your life to that purpose? Because that's what gives meaning to life.
Yeah, yeah. In my own life, educated as a Christian pastor, unfortunately, I was educated so heretically in this area about Israel. I was educated that the church, the Christian church, had kind of taken the place of Israel, and I hate to even admit that to this day. But one day I was reading in the Psalms where it said, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem." And I felt like the Lord prompted me, I want you to do that. And I started praying for the church. And then I felt like the Lord uh, rebuked me. You know how you feel those little impressions in your heart, not an audible voice, but He said, I didn't tell you to pray for the church. I told you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And so that was over 30 something years ago. And that's why we've been working. But I want to just use that as a segue to you talked about, the War of 67, the Yom Kippur War, but you spoke of a word that I'll have difficulty pronouncing. You'll have to help me. The Hasbara War, but you said Israel's never ending public relations battle against slander and defamation. And I see that all the time. So, is there any advice that you could give us as Christians who love Israel, who travel to Israel? Is there something we can do to try to help this war that's going on all the time against Israel?
Well, I'll give you the advice I received from a great rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. When I first came to the UN, um, I went to see him, and he said to me, you're entering the house of lies. That's how he called the United Nations. And he said, remember that in a hall of complete darkness, if you light one candle of truth, its precious light will be seen far and wide. So, and he said to me, your job is to speak the truth about Israel to the peoples of the world, which is what I've been trying to do alongside my other tasks. Because I think that the most important thing is to be armed with the truth and then to speak the truth before those who don't know the truth. Israel is maligned as an undemocratic state. It's the only democracy in a huge area. Israel is a beacon of human rights, of democracy, of freedom, and in an area that in many ways until recently had very little of that. And Israel is fighting to protect itself against annihilation from Iran, but Iran would threaten everybody else. It would threaten America. It would threaten Europe. It would threaten the America's allies in the Middle East. So Israel is there holding the fort. And sometimes this is maligned. We are said that we're colonists. We're in a strange land. We're not in a strange land. We're not the Belgians in the Congo or the Dutch in Indonesia. We're the Jews who come back to the Jewish land. When Jesus was there, he didn't overturn the money changers tables in Tibet. He turned it in the Temple of Jerusalem, which was a Jewish temple. He was a Jewish rabbi, and in fact, the common cores, the common threads of Judaism and Christianity tell you that the fake history that people try to create, that we weren't there, that we're recent interlopers, we came there only 100 years ago, that's completely false. We've been there from the time of the Bible. We were thrown out of our land, but we never lost hope to come back to Jerusalem. And in many ways, this was facilitated. And this is probably something your audience doesn't know, that the return of the Jewish people and the reestablishment of a Jewish nationhood in the land of Israel was helped enormously by Christian believers, by Christian Zionists over the centuries, and culminated in a tremendous efflorescence of Christian Zionists in the 19th century and the 20th century, so that Israel's greatest allies in the world are evangelical Christians. Now, you know that in the United States, but I'm sure people don't know that. Same thing in Brazil, same thing in Nigeria, same thing in Korea, same thing in Scandinavia. And so I find this understanding of many Christian communities around the world who say, we know that your story is a parable for all humanity, that it shows that the biblical prophecies were realized, and that in your success, we have the success for all humanity. I find that that's the basic truth, the most important truth. We have come back to our land. We are resuscitating our future. We're protecting our people, but in so doing, we're protecting our common heritage. And I think people should just arm themselves with historical facts, but also light a candle for truth. Just light one candle for truth. Find a fact, tell your neighbors about it. That's millions and millions of candles of truth.
Well, Mr. Prime Minister, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you spending time with us. I can't tell you again. The only reason I'm going to hold the book up again is for people who are watching because they could forget. But BB would be that nickname, I guess, for Benjamin. And BB, my story, this is your story. It's interesting, it's fascinating. I hope every Christian who's watching, and even if they're not Christian, I want them to get it. I want them to pray for Israel. So, our desire is to pray for you, to pray for upcoming elections, to pray for the state of Israel, to pray for the Jewish people. And I just want you to know that we as evangelical Christians love you and honor you and appreciate all that you have done for Israel and for the Jewish people.
Thank you very much, Pastor Moshe. Appreciate it greatly. God bless you all.
God bless you. Thank you.